Boker Tov, everybody. Nice to see you. I hope everything will be nice and smooth. Welcome to class 116 of our ongoing series on the Siddur, and we should finish the third paragraph of the Shema today. Today's class is dedicated in memory of Rona Katz. That's my grandmother-in-law. Actually, today is her second yahrzeit. Razel Bat Binyamin Tova Riva, sponsored by her children, my mother-in-law Barbara, and Aubrey Abrams and Michael and Ilana Katz and Brian and Hannah Katz. My grandmother was an amazing woman. She Baruch Hashem, she had arichas yamim and a lot of nachis. Well, children, grandchildren, great grandchildren. We should have a long life and good health. Okay. So we're in the middle of the third paragraph of the Shema, and on tzitzis. So why we're discussing a little bit why it's included in the third paragraph of Shema. It's not really part of the Shema. It's the Shema is the first two paragraphs. When we get up, it's really, and the themes of the first and the second paragraph are related. The themes of accepting, as the Gemara phrases it, the first paragraph is Kabbalat Ol Malchut Shemaim, the acceptance of heaven, the acceptance of the yoke of heaven, so to speak, of God's authority. And the second paragraph is the practical application of the acceptance of God, the acceptance of mitzvot, Kabbalat Ol Mitzvot. First, we have to accept that there's, it doesn't say there's a God. That's in the third Hadibra, in the third paragraph of the Shema. That we have to accept the kingdom of God. Kabbalat Ol Malchut Shemaim. You have to accept that God, you can accept there's a God, but he's divorced from the world, and we don't have to follow what he says. So here we have that God is, we accept the kingship of God, and therefore we accept the mitzvot. What's the third paragraph of the Shema? So that's what's it doing here? And of course, the Gemara also explains that's why it's the last paragraph. It's the first paragraph in the Torah. It's in Bamidbar, the Shema, Vayam, Shemor, in Dvarim. So really, should go chronologically, should go in order. And it's because the Gemara says, well, it's only said the mitzvah of tzitzis is only at night. I'm sorry, it's only in the daytime, not at night. So it's sort of less important. And therefore, we don't say it. But on the other hand, as we'll see, in many ways, tzitzit is more important, which is why they included in Shema. So the Gemara gives 5 reasons why. Five reasons why it's included in Shema. So let me share my screen for 1 minute. Okay, we'll take a look here, and we'll see the Gemara. What are we doing here? Okay, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Chaviva. So the Gemara says, Parsha Tzitzis, Mipnei Ma Kavua. Why did the rabbis include the Parsha of Tzitzis in Shema? Shema is like the central declaration of our belief in God. So what is tzitzis? It's not, you don't even have the word tzitzis, right? You don't have a four-corner garment, you don't have to wear it. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Chaviva Mnei Sheish Ba Chamisha Dvarim. Mitzvat tzitzit, okay, afterwards tzitzis. Yitzir Mitzrayim, I'm the Lord, the God who took you out of the land of Egypt. Ol Malchut, you have to do all the mitzvot. That meaning, that talks about Lo Tatur Acharei Levavchem, do not follow the ways of the heretics. Hirhur Aveirah, thinking about sin, and Hirhur Avodah Zarah, thinking about idolatry. So, of course, I hope some of you noticed that they say there are 5 things, and there actually are 6 things, right? Tzitzis, Yitzir Mitzrayim, Ol Mitzvot is 3, Dat Minim, Hirhur Aveirah, Hirhur Avodah Zarah. So there are actually 6 things that the Gemara says we do. So why do they say 5? So that's we have that a lot. There's 69 people there's 70 people who went to Egypt, but there are only 69. But okay, or there are 3, the famous Mishnah in Pirkei Avot. There are 3 crowns: Keter Kahuna, the crown of a priesthood, the crown of kingship, Keter Melucha, and the Keter Torah, and the crown of Torah, Keter Shem Tov Oleo Kapen, and the crown of a good name is even better. So there are 4 crowns, not 3 crowns, whatever. So the question doesn't bother me so much, although it's still a little bit strange. But obviously the commentaries just make mention. To me, the simplest answer is thinking about sin in general, and thinking about Avodah Zarah is one thing that combines into one. Some say that minim wasn't included. This is it's the original, manuscript, so to speak, only have 5. Or perhaps the most interesting answer, which thematically is, in other words, tzitzis is not included. In other words, there are 5. Obviously, it talks on tzitzis. So what are the 5 things that talks about tzitzit? It's in addition. tzitzis. But that's what the Gemara says. You have all these ideas. It talks about remembering all the mitzvot. I'm the Lord your God who took you out of Ilamantis. Lo tatur racharei lebavchem. Do not follow your heart. Do not follow your eyes. That's sort of looking into sin. The heart desires, the eye see, and the hand does, and then we sin. So that's the dat minim and the all our yearnings, so to speak, for sin. So because of all these important reasons, and as we mentioned, whenever there are 5 reasons for something, it means there are really no reasons. Not that no reason. That means that we need to put together a lot of reasons to say something. If there was one really good reason, that would be it. But you see, the Gemara has some of the most basic principles in Judaism are found in the Parsha of Tzitzit. And of course, I think I mentioned last week, how does it end? Anochi Hashem Elokecha, Ani Hashem Elokecha, how does it end? Let me get it in front of me. Always, Ani Hashem Elokecha Masher Tzeit Yadchem Eretz Yisrael Liotachem Elohim. This sounds like the Aseret HaDibrot. I was thinking this morning, and he didn't have time to look it up. Maybe somebody knows. What's the difference between Ani and Anochi? Of course, in meaning, there's no difference. But I'm sure I have to look up what the commentaries say. Why in the Aseret HaDibrot it says Anochi? Anochi to me sounds stronger. Like, I am the Lord your God. Ani Hashem Elokecha, I'm the Lord your God. I don't exactly know what that means in practice, but if anybody's ever seen the difference between Ani Hashem and Anochi Hashem, but clearly the Parshat Tzitzit reminds us of the Aseret HaDibrot. That's how it ends. So it's a really important idea, and that's why it was included in the Shema. It's not really part of the Shema, but it has talking about the Exodus and talking about all mitzvot and talking about not sinning, talking about accepting God. So therefore, we include it in the Shema. In other words, the Shema is sort of the most important things we have. It's interesting, earlier in the Gemara, we spoke about this many, many weeks ago, that the Gemara wanted to include Parshat Balak. Matov Alecha Yaakov Mishkanotecha Yisrael. They want to include the part Balak and Bilam in the Shema. And the Gemara goes through why. And the Gemara says the real reason we don't do it, it's too long. It's too long. The Rabbi, you take an extra 5 minutes, 8 minutes to say Shema. It's already long enough to say Shema. So that's very interesting. So you see that the Gemara was sort of interested in including other things. The Gemara says, why don't we include Parshat Mishkalot? Why don't we include weights? Because it says it have honest weights. That's also, to me, quite fascinating. The Gemara suggests the possibility of Nate Tzedek, King Tzedek. You have to have your weights have to be pure. We know in Parshat Kitetse that the Torah promises us long life. Evan Shlema, you have to have a full stone. You can't sell 15.5 ounces for 1 pound. 1 pound is 16 ounces, and the Torah calls it a toeva. So in Parshat Vayikra, in Sefer Vayikra, in Kedoshim, the Torah tells us that Avnei Tzedek, you have honest weights, because I'm the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. And the Rashi quote says, Almanat King, the powerful Rashi we've discussed in the past. That's the reason God took us out of Egypt. Why did God take us out of Egypt? So we'd be honest in our business dealings. When it says don't follow in the ways of Egypt, honest in business, that's what it means. It's the first question God asks us. That's a very powerful idea. So the Gemara says, no, you're talking about Egypt. We say Parshat Tzitzit because of Egypt. So we can say that. It's much easier to say honest ways. I'm the Lord your God who took out of Egypt. So this has more, but it's interesting. The Gemara was interested in adding. Shema is really 2 paragraphs. Shema Vayam Shema. And then we have a third add-on to say something important. But I really think, and that's what coming back to the answer, why there's 6 things if there are only 5. In other words, the Gemara says there are 5 reasons we say tzitzis, and then it lists off of 6. And tzitzis is the first, and then Yetziat Mitzrayim, and it reminds us of all the mitzvah, and it reminds us not to sin. So it seems like really what the Gemara is saying is that tzitzis is it's not that we have a mitzvah to remember tzitzis, and we have a mitzvah to remember the Exodus, and we have to do all the mitzvah. No, the Gemara is saying tzitzis is the reminder for Egypt. Tzitzis is what we do all the mitzvah. We spoke last week, the gematria of tzitzit is 613. Somehow that there's a connection between tzitzit and all mitzvah. Tzitzis is what reminds you of the crown of glory, the tchelet, as we discussed, reminds you of God in heaven. So it's not that there are 5 different reasons. The Parsha of Tzitzis reminds you of 5 different things. It's all part of Tzitzis. Why is parts of Tzitzis in? 6 reasons. Tzitzis, semicolon, and now there are 5 things the mitzvah of tzitzis does. The tzitzis causes us to remember the Exodus, have to figure out how. The tzitzis causes us to remember all the mitzvot. The tzitzis prevents us from sinning. The tzitzis talks about against heresy. So somehow the tzitzis, we wrap ourselves in God's uniform, and we put tchelet, and we remind ourselves of the sky, and we have a constant reminder. We're doing the tzitzis itself is what creates all the mitzvah. It's not that there are 5 different reasons we say the mitzvah, the parsha of tzitzis. Tzitzis, because of tzitzis, 5 different things will happen. The tzitzis will do 5 different things. So that's really, yeah.
Could I?
Yes.
Could I ask
Yes.
one question? It's been bothering me for a long time. And that's to do with the second paragraph of Shema, but I didn't get it. In the last passage of the second paragraph, why is the word Adama instead of Aretz?
Why are the marriage? I really don't know. Al Adama, that's an interesting question, kind of like Aniva Anochi. I have to mark that down. I have no idea. Why did you first sometimes use the word Adama and Aretz? I have to look. In other words,
Can't seem to hear you.
I'm sorry?
Oh, I couldn't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. When the Torah talks about exile from the land, I don't know. Does the Torah use the word Aretz or Adama? I really don't know. I'm sorry?
In the very last sentence of the second,
right.
The earth.
Yeah, so let's look at God's promise to Abraham. Does he use the notion of Aretz or Adama? I don't know. Let's put that on hold now. Maybe I can look into that for next week. I know I hate to say it, but like as Rav Soloveitchik would sometimes say, that question doesn't bother me. In other words, I'm not saying it's not a great question. Like anyway, but I don't know why it says Adama. But let's get back into tzitzis. What's really strange, Yocheved, I'll get to you in 1 minute. I see you have your hand up. What is interesting, and we alluded to this last week, but I want to develop this theme, and I thought about it a little bit more. Tzitzis is so important. They added it on to the Parsha of Shema. They added on, we have to say it every day, and we say it morning and evening, even though tzitzis doesn't apply at night. Tzitzis reminds us of so many other things that do apply at night. But the question is, if tzitzis is so important, why is it not a mandatory mitzvah? And it's not mandatory for men either, as we discussed. Women, it's never mandatory for, because in other words, even if a woman is wearing a 4-corner garment, she has no obligation to put on tzitzis. She's allowed to. What the Ramah says, the women don't, but if they want to, they can. I know today it sort of wouldn't be accepted in the Orthodox world, but if you look in the Shulchan Aruch, the Ramah says since men don't have to wear tzitzis, so women never bothered. In other words, men have to hear shofar, so the women want to hear shofar too. So they volunteered to hear shofar. But since men don't really have to wear tzitzis either, so the women never bothered to do the mitzvah. But if they want to, the Ramah writes they can. Okay, Beseder. But the question is, why is it not obligatory for men? It's obligatory if you have a 4-corner garment, but there's no obligation for a 4-corner garment. We don't say on Pesach night, if I'm hungry, so if I'm going to have a meal on Pesach night, I have to eat matzah. You have to eat matzah. Yeah, well, you have to eat in a sukkah whether you want to or not. So why don't the rabbis say like tefillin? Why don't the rabbis say you got to put on tzitzis? What do you mean? If I wear a 4-corner garment, tzitzis is so important. It reminds us of the Exodus. It reminds us of God. It reminds us of all the mitzvot. It helps us not to sin. And yet somehow it's not a mandatory mitzvah. So that's the question. If anybody has any ideas, I'd love to hear this. I thought of a few things, and it's going to tie into the Aseret Hadibrot, I think, which of course was very nice for this week. But anybody quickly think, in other words, it's so important, tzitzis, but yet nobody ever has to wear tzitzit. Yes, Yocheved.
Maybe, I don't know, maybe at the end of the day, even though I know it's better to do the commandment because you're commanded as opposed to Enamatsuvios. At the end of the day, you really have to want to be part of Hashem's army, so to speak, and put on his uniform. That's really the goal.
Excellent. I think that's the key answer. Excellent. Very good. What Yocheved is saying is the most important thing, accepting God, Ani Hashem Elokechem, to accept God, you can't command that. It has to be voluntary. The most important things we do because we want to do them, not because we have to do them. It is true that the Talmud says the reward for doing something you have to is greater than doing something you volunteer. There was a debate about, not the Gemara originally thought, as I think most people think, for good reason, we think this, obviously it volunteers on a higher level than somebody who's obligated. Obviously, they don't have to do it and they do it. So obviously that's greater than somebody who has to do it. So that's what the Gemara originally thought. And the Gemara says no. Or it says, no, it's greater to do it if you have to. And the commentaries explain this is human psychology. We like to do what we want. We don't like to be told what to do. So whenever we're told to do something, our natural reaction is not to do it. Why do I volunteer? Because I like to do it. So when you do something, you have to push yourself to do it. In a sense, it's harder. The other explanation, of course, is a volunteer can volunteer 25 hours a week, and he doesn't volunteer 30 hours a week. You say, amazing. He volunteers 5 hours a week. That's amazing. You have a job, you have to do it all the time. Volunteers take off as they're entitled to. You know, who can complain? But when it's like what we say in English, you get what you pay for. If you don't pay for it, that means you're obligated. I'm going to pay you. You have to do it. If you don't pay somebody, okay, you can't have too many expectations. So when you pay somebody, when the Torah obligates us to do something, the reward is greater. Nonetheless, being a volunteer is greater in terms of our accepting. I'm not talking about the reward. That's not the issue here. But obviously, you have to accept it as a reward. So I think the Torah, you have it very good. I think the Torah is saying, tzitzis, yeah, it's really important. It's one of the most important mitzvot. It's shakul. It's equal, as the rabbis say, to all 630 mitzvot. Here the Gemara said only 5 mitzvot. Exodus, God, all mitzvot, not sinning. And that Rashi quotes all the mitzvot. Mitzvot tzitzit shkula keneged kol mitzvot. So that's pretty crazy. I mean, but it's because the tzitzit is the way we volunteer to accept God, and that's why it ends with Ani Hashem Elokechem Asher Hotzeitechem Me'eretz Mitzrayim, like the divine revelation. This is really the asser that they brought over, saying in Shema that being a volunteer is much greater. What I actually didn't mention is it's very interesting. I was wondering I don't know the last time somebody wore a 4-corner garment, but that wasn't I don't know when it went out of style. Anybody in the clothing business knows the history of clothing? I'm sure in the Second Temple period, Jews wore 4-corner garments. I imagine the time of the Torah, that's what people wore. The Torah is saying, I don't know, but I don't know. A Roman toga doesn't have 4 corners. So I don't exactly know. Maybe people never wore 4 corners. I should look this up in the history of clothing. Was 4-corner clothing ever common? I really have no idea. But Rashi says, why is it only obligatory for 4 corners? He says something pretty wild. Anybody know? It's he quotes it in Chumash. If you open up your Chumash, why does Rashi say why it tzitzis only required if you have a 4-corner garment? Anybody know? So Rashi says because the 4 lishonot of Gula. We're getting up to Pesach. The reason we have the 4 cups of wine, of course, that in itself is very difficult. We're not going to get now. If you look in the Torah, there are actually 7 languages of redemption. There are really 7, but for whatever reason, we have to discuss that another time. We have the famous, what we call the Arba Lishonot of Gula, the 4 languages, the 4 expressions of redemption. So Rashi says the mitzvah, which ties in Egypt, right? Tzitzis is very much connected to Egypt. So Rashi says the 4 corners, just the way you drink the 4 cups of wine, because of the 4 languages of redemption, we have to put on tzitzis only on 4-corner garment, because the 4 corners remind us of the redemption of Egypt. Pretty wild. I would have never thought of that. If Rashi hadn't mentioned that, I would never think of such a thing. But in the accepting God is very voluntary. Now, where else do you have that? Of course, you have that in the Aseret HaDibrot. What's the first of the 10 commandments, right? Anochi, right? Every agrees. So Rabbi Shulman spoke last night, and a little bit. The question is Anochi a command? So we're going to go according to the Rambam. Anochi Hashem. How do you know there's a mitzvah to believe in God? Where's the mitzvah to believe in God? Where's it written in the Torah? There's a mitzvah to believe in God. Ta'amin b'Hashem. Where does it say that? So that's the reason you don't know, is because it doesn't say it anywhere. That's why, right? What does it say? So the Rambam says you could say Shema. Yeah, I see somebody. You're right. You could say I think. So the Rambam says the mitzvah to believe in God. Anochi Hashem Elokecha asher hotzaiticha me'eretz Yitzrayim. That's very nice, but I don't see where there it says you have to believe. It's simple Hebrew. In simple, Anochi is the introduction to the Ten Commandments. It was actually fascinating. I was blown away. Yesterday, I'm teaching this year, which I haven't taught before. I'm teaching an extra course this year in Tanakh in chat. So I just started since it's, and I normally don't teach Tanakh. So figured Tanakh. So I just started. A lot of the kids don't know the Parsha of the week, what's going on here exactly. And so I had a few kids. I assigned to give like a 10-minute presentation on the Parsha. I told them they have to teach me their PowerPoint presentations. They're beautiful, amazing. I don't know how to do these things. They're really good. They're great 10 kids. So they were talking yesterday, the Aseret HaDibrot. They were going through the Aseret HaDibrot. And they just said, what's the first of the 10 Commandments? Do not have other gods. And I was like blown away. Wow. I said, where did you get that from? Because everybody knows from kindergarten. See, this is the beauty of having kids who are sort of, aren't brought up in a sort of, in our observing world, they think totally independently. Like we're from nursery, everybody knows the first of the 10 Commandments is Anochi Hashem Elokecha. So they were reading it on their own. So they said, they got the first was, now they divided that second commandment into two because there's more than one commandment. Lo Elohim achrim al panai, lo tishtachav alehem. So you can't have other gods, you can't bow down, you can't do idolatry. So that's how they did 1 and 2, and 3 was don't take God's name in vain. So I was blown away. So I asked them, I said, where did you get this division of things? That's just how they naturally understood it. Why would anybody in their right mind think Anochi Hashem Elokecha is one of the 10 Commandments? It's the prelude, the introduction to the 10 Commandments. And we're going to lane tomorrow. Where does the first commandment end tomorrow? Like when the laning, the Tam Elyon, Tam Tachton. There's I don't know what that's called in English. I guess I do the upper notes and the lower notes, right? I'm sure. I imagine in all of your shuls, the Aseret HaDibrot is read. Like we have a Rabbi. Anochi Hashem Elokecha asher hotzaiticha me'eretz Yitzrayim mibeid avadim. There's a Rabbi mibeid avadim. There's not a sof pasuk, because what we do is we read the Aseret HaDibrot, each dibra as a pasuk. That's Tam Elyon. So lo tirtzach, lo tinaf. And it's not really what it is. It's lo tirtzach, lo tinaf, lo tignov. It's one pasuk. It's but we read each dibra as a pasuk. So the lo tirtzach, it's much smaller. But the first half, all of Shabbos is read as one pasuk. And yet the way the Tam Elyon divides up the dibrot is the first, what we call the first two is one. We don't have a sof pasuk at Me'eretz Mitzrayim. That continues, Lo Yeh Elohim Echrim. Maybe if I'll show at the end, I didn't have that on my screen. But if you look in your Chumash, you'll see what we call 1 and 2, and there's no break in the Torah. It seems to be, it really is one, and that's what was alluded to last night. What's number? If we take away 1 commandments, because 1 and 2 are really one, so what becomes number 9 and 10 is Lo Tachmod. If you look in Torah, Lo Tachmod Beit Reacha, comma, or that's the end of the pasuk dibra. Lo tachmod eshet reacha, and it's very fascinating. Lo tachmod seems to be 2 commandments, and Anochi and Lo Yeh seems to be 1 commandment. Be that as it may, we're not giving shir on the 10 commandments so much, but of course it is related. But Anochi, according to the Rambam, Anochi is the mitzvah to believe in God, but that's not what it says. It's a historical statement. So I think it's the same idea. I was thinking about that. I never really thought of this before, but I thought perhaps it's the same concept that the Torah can't command belief in God, right? And so much so that the Barbanel and others say there is no mitzvah to believe in God. That doesn't mean you don't have to believe in God. What it means is you can't have a concept of a mitzvah. It presupposes every mitzvah is built on the concept that there's a commander. If there's no commander, you don't have to listen to a commandment. So you don't count it as a separate mitzvah. It's the basis of all mitzvah. Like tzitzis, the basis of all mitzvot, so to speak, what we're saying. So but the Rambam does count it, and most people do count it as he counts as the first of the 613 mitzvot, and Sefer Mitzvot. The Rambam doesn't go in chronological order. The Rambam has his own order. Number one, belief in God. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I'm the Lord your God. So I think the Torah purposely doesn't. You can't command the belief in God. You have to accept the belief in God. So I think it's very beautiful idea that the Torah says something which is a very important commandment, perhaps the most important commandment, to believe in God. I guess it kind of is the most important commandment in the Torah, and yet it's not written as a command because we have to do it, even if we could command it, right? Yeah, right. Because the Torah says we can't command belief, or maybe we can, I don't know, but we do command emotions. I would have thought you can't command an emotion. How do you command lo tachmod? Well, I can command an action: eat matzah, put on tzitzis, blow shofar, sit in the sukkah. I can command many mitzvot. Don't take revenge. I can command honor your parents. How in the world can I command a feeling? Don't be jealous. And yet, so the Ibn Ezra has a bother. I mean, many are bothered by this question. I think the Ibn Ezra is a very fancy, very powerful, difficult idea. I've always said lo tachmod is the most difficult of the 10 commandments. Without a doubt, lo tachmod is harder than probably all the other 9 combined. Not to be, that's next to impossible. Who's not jealous? Lo tachmod. So yeah, we're getting into technical details of how you violate it. Is it just thinking? That's not for now. But the Ibn Ezra says, if you were a peasant, I think, and would you ever dream of marrying the king's daughter? So today in America, that's America. Everybody's equal. You can do whatever you want. These things happen. But in the most of history, nobility, royalty, marriage, royalty. If you were a peasant, you were in the feudal system. Yet you weren't in that. No, never in your life. You couldn't get out. That was how the world worked. That's the greatness of democratic societies. That capitalism. People can go from rags to riches. That was impossible throughout much of history. So even it says, never in a million years would a peasant think they can marry the king, the king's daughter. So too, somebody has a lot of money. So never in a million years. It's not for you. It's very hard, I'd say. It borders on the impossible. But that's what he says. But the Torah does command emotions. It says to be happy on Yom Tov. That's a command, and the command is not to eat meat and drink wine. And again, that's what we do. That's as Rav Soloveitchik says, that's the mechanism to try to get you to be happy, or to buy a new dress, as the Gemara says, give the kids toys, whatever makes them happy. But the mitzvah, the Torah does command emotion, which is interesting. So perhaps, I don't know, perhaps we could command belief too. I mean, the Rambam saying we do command belief, but the Torah doesn't put the command as a command. The Torah puts the command as a statement. I took you out of the land of Egypt, and therefore we sort of willingly accept it. Okay, maybe you can, if anybody has any comments, I'm happy to hear. Well, I'll give one more example. This is really the beautiful example. It's the Maharal of Prague who explains this. Where's the mitzvah of tzedakah written in the Torah? Okay, don't all answer at once. Where's the mitzvah of tzedakah written in the Torah? So it's really written twice. Probably the more famous place is in Re'eh.
Naton titen.
Naton titen, right? Al tikpotzet levavcha, patoch tifrach et yadcha. Open your hand, don't harden your heart. That's in Parshat Re'eh in the context of Shemitah. The mitzvah of tzedakah is the karvash nat hashava lavo. The 7th year is coming. Ooh, I'm not going to give any tzedakah, because the guy may not pay me back. You see right away the main part of tzedakah is not what we call charity, it's to give a loan. In other words, the idea of, because, he doesn't have to pay me after the Shemitah year, so I'm not going to give him a loan in halfway through year 6, because I may never get my money back. So that the Torah prohibits that. The Torah says that's Belial, that's like borders on idolatry. You got to open your heart and open your hand and give money. So that's the more, I think, famous example of tzedakah. The second place, the first place is mentioned is in next week's parsha. In kesef talve et ami et ha'ani mach lo tielo kenoshe. If you lend money, If you lend money to my nation, my people, the poor should be with you. But do not be to him like a creditor. You're not allowed to charge interest. This is the Torah's prohibition of charging interest. So the prohibition of charging interest is sort of the subset, or the if you lend money, don't charge interest. So how do you interpret the verse? The verse means don't charge interest. How do the commentaries and how does Rashi quote? What does the verse mean? The verse means it means you have to give money. This is not, the Torah says, if I lend money, don't charge interest. Okay. And if I don't lend money, I also won't charge interest because I'm not lending money. So obviously it's only if you lend money. So Russia, no. The word im, if, no, you don't know how to read Hebrew. In this case, or you don't read biblical Hebrew. The word im in the Torah, this is one of 3 cases in the Torah. The word im means when. It means when you lend money. What do you mean when I lend money? Oh, because you must lend money. Someone who could afford, you have an obligation to lend money. The mitzvah, it's not a voluntary mitzvah. So the Maral asked, very simple question. Very nice. So why doesn't the Torah say so? If the Torah meant when, say when. If it says if, it means if. The Torah can say ki. The Torah can say when you lend money, don't charge. What do you mean? So the Maral beautifully explains, and this is what we've been developing for the last number of minutes. You should do, of course you have to give. You have to loan money. It's an obligation. But the Torah doesn't want you to do it as an obligation. Why should I lend money? Because I'm compassionate. I have empathy for the poor. You have to do your obligations voluntarily. The Torah writes im kesef talva, because that's how the Torah wants you to give money. They want you to be happy. Giving tzedakah is so important. And remember, I'm talking about the most important mitzvah is belief in God. You know what the Rambam says the most important mitzvah asay is? It's interesting because belief in God is also a positive commandment. I don't know if this is a contradiction in the Rambam. I don't exactly know, but in Hilchot Matanat LeAvyonim, the Rambam writes, Staka is the most important mitzvah to say. It's Zera, it's a mitzvah of Zera Avram. It's why God chose Abraham to do Tzedakah al Mishpat. The redemption will come through the mitzvah of Tzedakah. Tzion b'mishpat tivdeh b'shaveha b'tzedakah. It's the quality of the Jewish people. So the Rambam Mamish says that the mitzvah of Tzedakah is the most important mitzvah there is in the Torah, the most important positive mitzvah there is in Torah, and yet the Torah in Mishpatim doesn't write it as an obligation. It writes it as a volunteer. The Rashi is pointing out, of course, you're obligated. So I think there's this beautiful or the idea between, yes, the Torah often phrases it in ways, and this comes up a lot next week in other context, that the Torah phrases it in a way that's not exactly what the Torah means, but it wants to get across a powerful message. You shouldn't, if you have to force you to give tzedakah, if tzedakah are like taxes, that's not good. Tzedakah is not like taxes, so how do I save on my tax? Okay, I'll pay taxes. What can I do? No, tzedakah is a beautiful way to share, to acknowledge God's blessings and share with others. Okay, I'll do one more thing on this, I guess tied into the Aseret Hadibrot.
Yeah. I just ask one more question on tzitzit. Is there any reference in Gemara to Yehuda? I mean, I think the first time that anybody talks about tzitzit or something like tzitzit is with Yehuda and Tamar, where she asked him to give her his I think it's patil,
right? His click is his coat. So why does it do with
coat? It says specifically the word. Somebody fill me in. I think it's patiling or something. And
I have to look it up. I don't have a chumash in front of me.
But there's no.
Let me
about that reference back to Yehuda.
Is there any reference that Yehuda was wearing tzitzis when he slept with a prostitute? So I mean, to put it, I don't think you know what I mean. Like there's a reason he said like that. I don't think he was so concerned about tzitzis. Like like that wasn't on his mind. Like
Tilim, he gave it the Tilim and the Matei.
So I'm sure there's a medrash like that. And now I'm thinking the Gemara has a wild story. I forget with who, but it's a beautiful story, right? And I have to look up where the Gemara has a fair. Some rabbi, listen, we know, rabbi wanted to sin with he went to this fancy prostitute, and the Gemara says he went up and he was getting undressed, and as he got undressed, the tzitzis hit him in the face. That's it. He ran away. He ran away, and the Gemara talks to power. That's what the Gemara is saying. It protects us from all things, reminds us of everything. So that's a very powerful Gemara, and I think it's a story, and I think it's a beautiful story. And the Gemara is never afraid to tell stories like this. That the rabbi was going to sin with can you imagine today saying that about a great rabbi? He was going to sin with the prostitute, and he didn't sin. No, that's the Gemara was very, very proud of the fact. They're talking about the power of tzitzit. So yes, I can totally understand why a midrash would say that Yehuda gave it to tzitzis, but the bottom line, it didn't help. In other words, the midrash should only say that if Yehuda was about to sleep with Tamar and then he didn't, because but he slept with her. So obviously, if he was wearing tzitzis, it didn't help. The whole thing doesn't make any sense. What I mean, tzitzis of Yehuda, like there's no tzitzis, there's no Torah yet, right? The Abba didn't keep Torah. I'm sorry, I don't want to get into it.
It's not. I'm not saying that.
I'm sorry. But when the Chama Leibowitz explains, then you can all throw stones at me. When the Midrash says the Avot kept Torah, it doesn't mean it literally. That's ridiculous. I'm sorry. I'm quoting the Rambam. Yes, they kept the ethical notion. They intuited Torah, absolutely. They intuited so much of Torah. But how did Yaakov marry two sisters? How did Abraham feed the people meat and milk? I mean, there are 50,000 things they did wrong. Not wrong. They did that the Torah later prohibited. Of course, Lot, right? The famous medrash that Lot served matzah because it was Pesach. So Baruch Kivanti, 15 years ago, I wrote I wrote an article. You'll tell me if it's very nice about what it means that it was Pesach in Stom. It means that Stom in Egypt. The Gemara is not saying it was Pesach. It's ridiculous. Lot was observing Pesach, and that's why I gave matzah. Come on, but it means the idea of Pesach. Treating strangers, that's what Egypt was all about, of course. And Vayit Mama, all the words, being in a hurry, that's Egypt. That's what it means. The rabbis just expressed it in this powerful language. But it's to say that's what when the Rambam says only idiots believe Midrashim literally, this is what he means. Because you tell a kid in chat, like I'm talking about my kids in chat who aren't brought up in the system, and you tell them that Lot was observing eating matzah because it was Pesach, they'll laugh at you. So we don't laugh because we're so tied in. Our chazal are so wonderful. Of course, it has great meaning. The medrash has great meaning, but it's not literal meaning. So I don't think Ayuda didn't wear tzitzis, but no, yes, more. What I want
to point out, a few years ago there was an exhibit at the Hebrew Museum. Israel Museum in Yerushalayim, and on tzitzit, and the history of people in that era wearing tassels at the ends of their clothes, and they pointed out, that the Yehuda, the wording is, she asked him for patil lecha. So it's like what they said there is that
that's
what they said is that noble people, princes of that era, carried a knotted rope, and they used that to identify themselves. So the concept of tzitzit wasn't just created from nothing. There was
100%,
some cultural reference in the time to that. So
we mentioned last week how Tchelet is the royal blue, Achashverosh. Of course, and the Torah does a lot of that. I mean that for those who are into that, to study the Torah in light of Near Eastern history, the Torah takes concept. Listen, that's Koren. I just put out I think last year, 2 years ago, when the Koren put out their book on Shemot. I don't know if they're going through all of
they put out Vayikra.
They put up Vayikra too, right? I haven't seen it. The Shemot I have at home. I read a little bit. I haven't read the whole thing. The truth matter, I'm not so into that. I just whatever. But to understand the Mishkan, they have a whole thing. Now you can only understand the Mishkan in the context of how temples were built and other religions. And you see the structure. Much of the Torah is understood in light of the ancient world. Or the Rambam would write in response to the ancient world. I mean, that the Torah is often critiquing that. The Rambam was heavily criticized, of course, for this. not just on korbanot did he say this, that we need a korbanot because that's how the world works. The Rambam has a lot of the mitzvot were anti-pagan practices. People didn't like it because the Torah is eternal. The Rambam agreed. The Rambam is the one who pushes the Torah eternal more than anybody else. And yet the Rambam says these mitzvot were given in a historical time period in a response. That's so yes, the fact that the Torah came along and made it something great. As a matter of fact, Mordechai Breuer has a beautiful article on Sukkot. That's Mordechai Breuer. There were two Mordechai Breuers. I mean, I'm sure there were more, but two famous ones. Both first cousins, great grandsons of Shinshon Hirsch. So one was a great historian. He wrote on German Orthodoxy, modernity in tradition. Great historian. They were both observant, of course. And his cousin, the Mordechai Breuer, was a Tanakh expert, one of the founders of Herzog College, affiliated with Gush Etzion. That's Mordechai Breuer. So he's a super creative, original thinker. Wow, really super duper. He writes amazing stuff. He has a famous thing. He famously accepts the premises of biblical criticism just as part of God's way of expressing himself. God wanted to express himself in many voices, so he contradicted himself, but it's very controversial. But that's one of the famous things. Mordechai Breuer, he basically accepts the premises. He just say they are divine. Interesting. Anyway, you can read about it. So he has an article on sukkahs where what the Torah did is everybody lived in a sukkah. Every farmer, every non-Jewish farmer, when he went to harvest in September, October, not like today, the tractor. So they slept in Sukkot. And what the Torah did, he has a long article about the very beautiful. And he explained what the Torah did is it converted the sukkah of chol, this like tent on a camping trip. You're out in this sleeping in this little nothing hut, and the Torah converted it into a holy sukkah, and of course we've made it really holy. The ushpiz and everything comes, but all the Torah did is take a natural event and turn it into a mitzvah. So yeah, absolutely, I'm sure tchelet. So maybe Yehuda wore tzitzis because that's what everybody wore, but he wasn't wearing tzitzis at tzitzis. He was wearing it as as a special person that he was. Okay, anyway, let's do one more example, I guess, this week's Parsha of yes and no, and do we accept mitzvot voluntarily or not? So for this, actually, I'll tie it into how tzitzis begins. Vayedaber Hashem al Moshe lemor. Right, we don't have that in the first two paragraphs of Shema. Already, it's very different. The third paragraph is like totally different. And God spoke to Moshe. What does the word lemor? We've spoken about this before. What does the word lemor mean? And God spoke to what would we be missing if the verse said Vayedaber Hashem al Moshe?
Whether he should pass it on to the Jewish people.
So that's what people say. He should speak to the Jew. Why else is God speaking to him if he's not going to speak to the Jewish people? So that's not so simple. Maybe he wouldn't be allowed to speak. But the word, right, it means to respond. The word lemor in biblical means to respond or to act upon it. So God spoke to Moshe. He's got to respond. He has to speak back. So he has to speak to Daber b'nei Yisrael. Go speak to the Jewish people. I heard be lashon hara. He needs the permission to speak. But the word lemor always has a response tied into it. So now let's take a look. How does the Aseret HaDibrot begin? So let me share my screen for one moment. Okay, let's see if we can find it. Exodus 20. And God spoke all these things lemor. So the people, what does the word lemor mean here? Who's God speaking to?
The Jewish people.
Yeah. So who's responding?
Well, I think they were supposed to respond. Maybe say yes.
So this is a famous. So the word lemor is problematic here. What do you mean? God? Who are they going to say? He's speaking to the whole Jewish people. But lemor always obligates a response. So Rashi I think it's a well-known Rashi. Melamed shehayu oni malhein hein v'alav. They would answer, yeah, it's so beautiful, that Hebrew. Yes, yes, no, no. When God said, Lo yeh don't have other gods. No, lo. When God said, they affirmed their acceptance of the Ten Commandments. So when there was a positive commandment, yes, yes, love. That's what Rashi says. Rashi's quoting a Mechilta. He's working. Yeah, here you see the Mechilta, and then Ibid, Sham, and Ibid quoting the Mechilta. So let's go to the Mechilta. Mechilta is the rabbinic commentary on Shemot. Lemor. That's exactly what Rashi said. Rashi says he's quoting Mechilta. Not exactly. Quotes Divrei Rabbi Ishmael. That's what Rabbi Ishmael says. Rabbi Akiva Omer al hein hein v'alav hein. No, Rabbi Akiva disagrees. They always answered yes. So it says keep Shabbos, yes. Don't have other gods, yes. According to Rabbi Ishmael, they said no. According to very like who cares? Rabbi Ishmael, the Mechilta quotes, Rashi only quotes the opinion of Rabbi Ishmael. He doesn't quote Rabbi Akiva. He doesn't tell you there's a debate. You have to know this. So you have to look in the Mechilta, and that's, by the way, if you really, really want to learn Rashi well, which is, with that's what you do for every Rashi. You look up the source and you'll see he never quotes a complete source Rashi. That's why Rashi anybody can understand a little bit of Rashi, but to be a Talmud Chacham, to fully understand Rashi, you've got to be a major Talmud Chacham. You've got to be on the Chama Leibowitz to understand everything in Rashi. So what's this argument about? So Rav Soloveitchik has a beautiful, beautiful explanation, which I wrote about once also. And Rav Soloveitchik says, what are they arguing about? Okay, keep Shabbos, yes. Don't steal. So what's the difference in the answer? Yes, I won't steal. No, I won't steal. So Rav Soloveitchik explains as follows. Rabbi Yishmael says, Omrim al hein hein v'alav lav. Keep Shabbos, yes. Okay, honor parents, yes. Don't steal. No, of course, I would never steal. Of course not. No, yeah. Who in the right mind steal? And Rabbi Yeshua, how the Rav is interpreting it. Rabbi Akiva says, yes, Daddy, I won't steal. Really, I want to steal. Yeah, in other words, but I accept your authority, even though I don't want to. Yeah, yes, okay. Don't come home late. No, of course, I would never come home late. I always know to come home on time. Yes, Mommy, I'm okay. Fine. I won't come home late. So Rav Soloveitchik said what they're arguing about is, do we accept mitzvot voluntarily or because we have to? What's better? In other words, no, I would never do that. That means, well, of course, I accept the mitzvot even if I'm not commanded. And yes, no, I only accept the highest level of the mitzvot is to accept it because God has commanded us to accept it. I think this is only Rav Soloveitchik could do something like this. Take this obscure argument. I mean, like, obviously, there's something to it. Because what's the Mechilta quoting an argument? Who cares? They answered, yes, I will do it. No, I won't do it. Like, I mean, I know yes and no are opposite, but we all understand they're saying the same thing. They're agreeing. That's so God wanted the Jewish people to respond. They had to accept the Aseret HaDibrot. Very beautiful. We don't necessarily think like that. They didn't just listen. They had to answer for each one. And the question is, what do they answer? They answer yes or no. And we know that when you speak, it's a very different way. So that's a beautiful idea. Rashi, of course, accepts all. No, of course, Rashi's taking the view that, no, I would never do that. That you have to do the mitzvot in a sort of a voluntary sense. So this is all connected, that tzitzis is so important. It's all the mitzvot. The mitzvot is going to cause you to observe all the mitzvot, and it's going to remind you of the heaven, and it's going to be the reminder of Egypt, and the four corners are going to remind you of the redemption from Egypt, and you're not going to stray after your heart, and you're not going to follow your eyes. Wow, all because of this mitzvah that nobody has to do. That nobody has to put on a four-corner garment, and yet that's what we dress up our kids. When they're 3, I don't know when the most people put on their tzitzis on their kids. Okay, the woman's issue is just an interesting issue. We've alluded that before, discussed the practice today in the Orthodox world is women don't wear tzitzis. Okay, maybe it'll change one day. I don't know. I agree. It'd be a little bit. You'd probably get a lot of looks if you did that in shul, but really it goes with the whole thing. Why women are exempt from mitzvot. We've addressed that here and there. We don't. There is no real. Nobody has figured out what exactly how mitzvah say Shehazman Grama works. Because there's so many exceptions. There are almost more exceptions. Maybe there are more exceptions. Kiddush is an exception. Hanukkah is an exception. Purim is an exception. Matzah is an exception. There are so many exceptions to the rule that it makes the rule very hard to apply. And why does it apply here and why doesn't it apply there? No one's quite totally figured that out. Everybody tries to put it up, but whatever it is, our tradition teaches that a woman is not obligated in time mitzvot. The most famous reason, because they're too busy. No, it's not such a great reason. That reason doesn't really stand up to much scrutiny. What about before they're married, after their kids are grown up? What are they, and why can't the man do a lot of the stuff? It doesn't. It applies a little bit here and there. It's not like doesn't explain everything. And they're not busy to hear on Purim. They're not busy to go to the Pesach Seder. They're not busy on Purim, but they're busy on Rosh Hashanah because they don't have to hear shofar. But they're not busy on Purim, so they have to hear the Megillah. You know what? I'll tell you something. It takes a lot less time to hear shofar than it does the Megillah. Once you hear those first blasts, you fulfill the 5 minutes over. And so, anyways, okay, that's interesting. But since it's conceptually, this wrapping ourselves in mitzvot, that is the most, that's what it's so important. It's shkula keneged kol mitzvot, and we do it as a volunteer. Maybe, and we have our belief in God as a volunteer. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. It's not a command to believe in God. It's a statement, and we willingly accept it as a command, and we give tzedakah because we want to give tzedakah. Whether the fact that they're behind the scenes, our tradition teaches you have to do them is very nice, but that's not how the Torah expresses it. And it's always important to know how the Torah expresses it, and then how the rabbis interpret it, and develop it into what we have now. Okay, any questions on this? Let's move on to Emet v'Yatziv. Hashem Elokechem Emet. Hebrew. Somebody, okay, stuck. I'm not sure what you say. It's stuck. Okay, I'll take a look at the chat a little bit later. Okay, so that's it. That's what we'll talk about. I'll just say one thing. I said lemor. You have to repeat. So in the Otzer Hatfilot Siddur, it says the word lemor. Very interesting. I never really thought of this. Whenever the Torah says Vayder Hashem Moshe lemor, it means Moshe should repeat word for word, verbatim. Moshe is a recording secretary. He's not allowed to take initiative and say what he wants. Vayedaber Hashem Moshe lemor. You say, this is what I say, you pass it on to your people. Very interesting. By the way, he didn't do that when he first came onto Paro. If you look in Parshat Shemot, you can do this for homework. God told them what to say. When Moshe and Aaron came, they didn't say what God told them to say. They ad-libbed. But that's just a very interesting idea. When they have the Gemara does say that Moshe did 3 things on his own and God was happy. You see this, the Gemara in Shabbos. What did he do? He added 1 day before Matan Torah. Torah only really has 2 days. Right there's a whole debate, 2 or 3 days. Shlosha me'ekbala. I think Gemara says Moshe added a 3rd day on his own initiative. Moshe broke the luchot. Obviously, God didn't tell him to break the tablets. Yasher koach. God gave him a yasher koach for breaking the luchot, and I forget the 3rd thing now. I have to look it up. It's a Gemara in Shabbos that 3 things Moshe did on his own, and God was happy with. But you see, okay, everybody has to do things there. You can't be a total robot, even Moshe. But when the verse says, "Vayedaber Hashem Moshe lemor," it just means we have to. You're supposed to repeat what God say verbatim. The other thing that some of the commentaries explain is that by Vayedaber Hashem, it's sort of the exact opposite now. It's almost opposite. Vayedaber Hashem Moshe lemor, God spoke to Moshe. God spoke to Moshe, gave him like very little, and Moshe had explained much more. In the Torah, if you want to, or you want to put in the Torah Shebechtav, is written very little. The Torah Shebaal Peh, the oral law, explains everything. Vayedaber Hashem Moshe lemor. This is what you're going to put in the Torah, but you have to explain much more. In other words, you say that, but you have to explain what's going on. So Vayedaber Hashem. That's how some of the commentaries I saw explain it. Again, it's not how, I don't know, I never really looked into it before. We just take it, God said, say over. By there, God said saying, say over, whatever. But you see, it has much more meaning. The word lemor, to respond, to say, to repeat, or to expand. Really, those are the 3 explanations. To elaborate. And all three are true. You have to repeat, you have to repeat and expand and respond. So that's what the word lemor means. Very interesting idea, I think. Then just one last idea before we just introduce. I see it's getting late. We'll introduce maybe Emet the Yatzib. The last verse. That's so basically Shema. What do we have here? Shema in the Aseret at the we begin Shema Yisrael, right? If we're putting Shema together, which of course in the Torah they're not. There's three separate paragraphs, nothing to do with each other. But we put them together. Chazal put them all together. So we begin Shema Yisrael, the acceptance of God, of course. That's the other, you're right, I think somebody wrote, that is another example of accepting God, belief in God. And we end on the Hashem Okechem. Again, it's the same idea. Shema Yisrael and the Hashem Okechem are very similar ideas. And then it ends on the Hashem Okechem. The verse begins on the Hashem Okechem and ends on the Hashem Okechem, right? We say this every day in Shema. Why? Why do you say it twice? How many times do you have to say, I'm the Lord your God? Ani Hashem Elokechem asher tzeitichem me'eretz Yitzrayim liot lachem le'Elohim. Ani Hashem Elokechem. Even liot lachem le'Elohim is also repetitive. But why did it say Ani Hashem Elokechem twice or three times?
Emphasis.
So emphasis, so that always is a true answer. In other words, we always, that's the answer the Ibn Ezra often gives, Rabbi Shmuel, Dibrat Torah Kol Shmo B'nei Adam. This idea that every letter in the Torah has extra meaning, which we were all brought up on, again, is really a debate in the Talmud. That's Rabbi Akiva's opinion. Rabbi Akiva, we doresh even on the crowns of the Torah, every et. But Rabbi Shmuel is saying, no, Dibrat Torah Kol Shmo B'nei Adam. The Torah speaks, repeats itself, that they don't have to worry. The Ibn Ezra says that's why the story, the 15 differences between the story when Abraham's servant went to meet, to find a wife, and now the story told over. Of course, when you tell over a story, you never use the exact words. The Chamalivas couldn't take this. She couldn't think so. But many of the Pashtanim would often say like this in Torah. They didn't get so excited. Why in the first set of the commandments does it say lo tirtzach, lo tinab, and the second set of commandments says lo tirtzach, velo tinab, velo tinab. Why did that come about? So some commentators didn't get excited. Big deal. But that's not the way we were brought up. But you should know such a view exists. And so, emphasis is always true, but generally we look to find maybe additional ideas also. So, and it's true. When the Torah says 36 times, treat a stranger nicely because you were strangers in Egypt, then it wants to emphasize it a lot. Absolutely. But the Malbim here just says, I think, a very important idea. Or whatever, I think an idea we know. Why is he the Lord our God? What makes him our Lord that we have to follow him? The fact that he took us out of Egypt, right? Not that he created the world. Who cares? That's the Kuzari's question. Why doesn't the Ten Commandments begin, I'm the Lord your God who created the world? So we won't go into his answer, but the similar answer is our relationship to God is not based on God's power and creativity. It's based on our historical connection. God took us out of Egypt. It's not that he created the world. God developed a relationship because he took us out of Egypt. That's why we have to accept God, not because he created the world. And that too, but the relationship is based on Egypt. But even when we go into exile, that's how the Malbim says. Even throughout the Malbim died in 1890 approximately. I think he was born in 1810. I don't remember exactly, but 19th century. Malbim would live throughout most of the 19th century in Romania, and I think that's where he lived most of his life. And so the Malbim says that even when we're in, God won't abandon us. It's really our question that it's not so much we have to accept God in exile too, but it's God will still be our God and he will bring us back. And that, of course, ties in beautifully to the end of the second paragraph. The Manyabru al Ha'adama, Marty will have to do Adama al Aret, God, that we should have long life on this land. And we have exile. And so the Shema, the third paragraph, that's what brings us back to that idea that God will bring us back to the land. I am the Lord your God. Don't worry, even when things are not so bright, they will get brighter. As my father was always.
Rabbeinu Bachia says that the reason why it says Asher Hotzeti Me'eretz Mitzrayim is to teach us the mitzvah of Pidyon Shvuyim.
Yeah, so a couple weeks ago, Rabbi Nachbar on his shir.
That's where I learned it.
Right, it says the first of the Ten Commandments is a beautiful thing. He says, "Anochi Hashem Elokecha asher tzitich me'etzrayim pijon shvuyim." The first commandment is to redeem hostages. That's what he said. It's a very beautiful. That's where
I learned it from internal promotion.
I'm sorry.
I learned
Yeah, very good. Absolutely. There are always many explanations, but here where the idea I started saying my father was a great optimist. Hopefully, I picked up part of that. Jews have to be optimists. We couldn't survive if we weren't optimists. We have to look at the glass. I know we like to be pessimists or whatever. I heard somebody mentioned to me the joke this week. What's the difference between a Jewish optimist and a pessimist? Sometimes if I get it right, a Jewish optimist, a Jewish pessimist says things can never get worse. They're so bad or something there. And the optimist says, yes, they can. Or, I don't know. I blew it. Okay. Whatever it is, you get the idea. But so we Jews, we're here, yes, and we're going through obviously a very difficult time now. But it's a lot better than 1939 or 1943. You know, we are, whatever. It's not good, but it's not all terrible either. There are many positive things happening in the Jewish world. So it's Anochi, God is always with us. So, okay, just very, very quickly to review. I mean, I sort of reviewed already. Tzitzis. It's not that we say Parshat Tzitzis because it has 5 things in it, which Gemara says 5 things and it mentions there's 6 things. No, the Tzitzis reminds us of all the 5 things, reminds us all the important things, belief in God, and God is our God, and we will not sin, and all the mitzvot, and don't follow your temptations. Wow, all because of our tzitzit reminding us of God, wearing God's uniform, as somebody said, right, as we discussed, and that's, of course, we have to accept it voluntarily, because that's the beauty, really, to do something, to believe in something fully. You can't have to do it. You have to want to do it. You have to want to give tzedakah. You have to want to accept God. You have to want to believe in God. You can't force people. So the most important things the Torah leaves to do this on our own. I think it's such a powerful idea, and that's why tzitzit becomes so important, even if you don't wear them, even if you don't have to wear them in a certain thing. Then we talked a little bit about laying more, accepting voluntary or not. How did the Jewish people respond to the Aseret? They brought hein, lab, lab. Yeah, yes, we won't do it, or no, we won't do it. And that argument in the Mechilta that Rav Soloveitchik so beautifully explained. And to repeat, what is the word lay more? To repeat, to respond, to elaborate, and that's our role, to elaborate and to make the mitzvot apply in all times throughout history. Exile, not exile, we have the Lord our God, and that's what we begin Shema Yisrael, and we end Anochi Ani Hashem Elokechem, Lord your God. Okay, just let me very quickly take a look at any questions. Okay, yes, the last week's shir that have that delay is posted online. Okay, all our stuff is posted. Thank you, Ilana. It is our uniform, absolutely. Arab clothing is 4-cornered. It's cool. That interesting? I assume a kafia is 4-cornered. It's interesting. They have to wear I don't know that. Okay, long shirt like Indians, angle length. Okay, very 4 corners of the earth, which of course isn't really true either. We use that expression, although people believed it. People believed the earth was flat, but 4 corners of the earth, yeah. It's Chaim gives us understanding of the first line as a prelude. I'm not sure what you mean by this understanding. Probably something I said, maybe. I don't know. You want to elaborate, Steve?
Yes, what you said was that the first is not a commandment, right? That your students.
Oh, what I said, right? It's an introduction, right?
That's right, it's an introduction.
It was so powerful that my students intuitively on their own just began this 10 Commandments. That was so powerful to me. Happened yesterday in class. I was really blown away by that. Okay, understanding that wealth is bestowed by divine, we recognize that we are merely stewards of this gift. Yeah, of course. Of course, God has blessed us. It's partially our work, but everything depends on luck. For everybody who works hard and is bright, there are 10 other people who work just as hard, who aren't just as wealthy. There's so many things we all know, we've spoken many times, that go into our wealth. Absolutely. Therefore, we have to get it. So to our intellect. Yes, very good. Okay, many rejected the Rambams. Yeah, okay. They burned the books of the Rambam, but that wasn't a good thing. The Rambam is the Rambam. You can disagree or not, but you can read. If the Rambam says it, it can't be so bad. Yes, he said controversial things, but all great people say controversial things. That's what it means to be a great person. You don't you think outside of the box. Staka into chat Incorrect transliteration. Thank you. I'm not exactly sure what you mean. If I mispronounced something wrong, I apologize. Okay, thank you very much. Why we kissed the tzitzit, I'll have to answer next week because I have to go teach my contemporary halakha class now in chat. So I got to run. So thank you very much. A Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, and everybody be well.
Very
Okay.
much.
Look forward to learning with you soon.
you,
Please
Rabbi
invite your
Jay.
friends. And all the best.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Okay, Shabbat
Shabbat
Shalom.
Shalom.
Shabbat